Hi, I'm Bart Mixon. I was on Tom Savini's special makeup effects crew for Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Let's see, I'm a Houston native, born in Texas in 1958. I was still living in Texas when Chainsaw 2 went into production in 1986. But I did have, by that point, I'd already worked on a number of films in LA, Forbidden World, The Supernaturals, Nightmare on Elm Street 2. So I wasn't a stranger to the special effects world. Also, I had made some connections in LA, both personally and my brother, who was living there since 1982, which helped in the long run get me on Chainsaw 2.
This is my chance to stop playing headbanging music and do something real.
I'd known Tom Savini, or been corresponding with him for a number of years. In fact, I tried to get on Creepshow, I think back in the early 80s, but for whatever reason that didn't happen. But I'd heard that Chainsaw was coming to Austin. Again, I have a twin brother, Brett, that lived in LA, and he knew a lot of the crew that was coming to work on it. I'd been contacting Savini trying to get on the team, but nothing was really happening at that point. And John Vulich, who was one of the other team members, had mentioned to my brother that Savini wasn't going to hire me over the phone, that if he met me in person, that he would hire me pretty much on the spot. So on a Sunday, I drove to Austin, met with Tom. John was right. He hired me pretty much then and there. By the time I came onto it, they'd already been in pre-production for a few weeks, so like all the main characters and gags had been dealt out. So of course, Savini being the boss, he was the main go-between with Toby. But I did work the set a lot, mainly we'd do the makeups in the shop, and then they would go to set, and then I would be on set to maintain them. And I also did Leatherface, his lips and eyes. We wanted some like ulcers on his lips, so there was I built those up every day. There was basically scar plastic. It's a plastic material that you could dissolve the edges with acetone. So I would build those up on his lips, color his eyes, and then again watch him and the other characters on set. Toby last minute decided he wanted some abrasions on the side of Lou's face, and we hadn't prepared anything. Thankfully, I had my kit with me, and so I was able to improvise something, on the spot that Toby was happy with.
Time for incoming mail!
This was a little different, maybe a little overwhelming for me at that point. I mean, right after that, I went on and worked on RoboCop, which was even bigger and better. But it was certainly probably the biggest thing I'd been on at that point. So I think just the underground layer set, I mean, that was very impressive to see in person. And just the being on a big film like that for the run of the show was new to me. I mean, even when I was on Nightmare on Elm Street 2, we did the Jesse transformation where Freddy bursts out of Jesse's body. So we were on set for like 2 days shooting that. So my experience up to that point had been more limited. But this, working the set full time, this was a kind of a taxing shoot in that it was the summertime in Austin, which is not a good time to shoot a movie. Also, we were shooting, a lot of the sets were built inside, I guess, like sheet metal buildings. So it was like 110, 115 degrees. So that was pretty brutal. Texas heat and makeup are not friendly to one another. So say the Chop Top makeup, Bill Moseley, that Sean McEnroe did his makeup, and I helped him apply it once in a while. And then again, would have to watch it on set. There's a makeup material called Pax Paint that Dick Smith had developed for The Hunger. Actually, I think it goes back to Tootsie, but anyway, it's an acrylic paint and an acrylic-based adhesive that are mixed together. So it's almost like a plastic layer. It doesn't really, doesn't breathe. So we would get sweat blisters underneath it. And I learned very quickly that you didn't wipe the sweat away, you had to blot it. Because if you wiped it, then just this big layer of color would just smear off, come off with it. It was dry, but it was just, again, like a plastic sheet. So we would basically have powder puffs and go around just blotting and bursting these sweat blisters, but trying not to disturb the makeup. So, and then just regular prosthetics. the foam latex appliances, again, the heat, the actors start sweating. So yeah, it's gonna, stuff's gonna start falling off. So heat's never your friend with the makeup.
Look what you did to my plate, you bitch!
When I came on the show, again, all the primary characters had been assigned. Savini had assembled a really impressive crew. John Vulich did the grandpa makeup. Gino Crognali did the skinned Lou makeup. Mitch Devane did the leather face and the hitchhiker puppet. And then Sean McEnroe did Chop Top. So again, I did lab work at the beginning, running foam latex, that sort of stuff in the shop, some mold work. There was one effect that I did get to sculpt that eventually got cut out of the movie. But this is probably my favorite chainsaw story. There was a sequence in a parking garage where the Saul family attacks, I guess, a bunch of college kids or something. So one guy is going to get his hand cut off with a chainsaw. So I got to sculpt the stump, and then it was going to be the old hand through the base floor of the set with the fake stump, so you could see the fingers, wiggling. The performer they selected had recently lost his hand. So I remember when I was taking the life cast of his stump to do the prosthetic, I was, talking with him, and I was like, wow, you just lost your hand recently. Are you going to be okay with this? He goes, oh, sure. It's Chainsaw 2. It's going to be cool. Toby Hooper. So we do the makeup. We produce the makeup. We do a test on it. And I believe John Vulich was applying it. But we get the stump on the guy, and they get it all blended off and bloody. And the guy freaks out. He's like, too soon. And he just got up and ran and never saw him again. And so then they had to restructure the scene because they still wanted to use the severed, hand gag. So here, the one gag that I pretty much, created for the movie, got cut or modified heavily because, this guy freaked out, which understandably so. But again, we were like, you sure you're going to be cool with this? He's like, yeah, but turns out he wasn't.
How good are you?
Savini certainly had an impressive resume even at that point. He'd done, Friday the 13th and Creepshow, and so he was like the go-to guy for splatter effects and just gore in general. But he did have a very strong team. I know Sean McEnroe, who did Chop Top, he came from Rick Baker's shop, so he had done American Werewolf and Videodrome and shows like that for Rick.
You're my fave.
A lot of the other guys I'd met there, like John Vulich, who did Grandpa, I think he had a history with Tom prior to that, but he'd gone on to open Optic Nerve. Unfortunately, John's no longer with us, but since, between Chainsaw and he had a very lengthy career doing shows like Babylon 5, and he was one of the main, he did Buffy and Angel, so he was one of the main effects shops like in the 90s. Optic Nerve was Vulich's place. Mitch Devane basically went on to be like Greg Canham and Rick Baker's main sculptor. So like Mrs. Doubtfire, he sculpted that makeup, the Nutty Professor for Rick Baker. Just an amazing career. He's probably recognized as one of the best sculptors ever in our industry. Gino Crognali, who's gone on to do like The Walking Dead, he's been on that a lot, but he did again, the skinned Lou makeup, which he worked on that for pretty much like a month or more, just sculpting it. It was a beautiful, finely detailed sculpture. And then once I went on set, we brought in Gabe Bartalis, who's he had done like the Basket Case movies and Frankenhooker, and so he's again a very strong makeup effects force even to this day. So he had a very well-rounded team.
The Saw is family. It's family.
I think Chainsaw 2's got a lot of really cool just makeup effects in general. I thought the Chop Top makeup that Sean did, I thought was on Bill Moseley, I thought was very convincing. The split scalp with the exposed plate.
Non-flashback. Oh.
Again, we'd make him up in the shop, and then we'd drive to set. And on the way to set, Moseley wanted some cigarettes, so we pulled off to like a truck stop, and he goes in to buy the smokes. And the guy behind the counter, I guess, thought it was real because he wouldn't make eye contact with him. He was like, looking down and like, oh, here's your cigarettes. Oh, is there anything else? But again, it was so convincing in person that this guy apparently thought it was real because he wasn't like, oh, cool, look at you. But he was just like, oh, geez, So he was visibly disturbed by it. So I think that's always cool when you do a makeup like that you fool the public. Years later, I worked on Bad Grandpa, so it was the same kind of deal where we had to take our makeup out in public every day and, you know, and trick people.
Hey, lick my plate, you dog dick!
There were a lot of cool, like dummy head gags that Tom had his own technique, I guess, for doing these. I hadn't done a lot of that sort of thing at that point in my career, but we would have like the skin for the false head and have like a plaster shell inside of it and like fill it with like sheep brains or something, and then, you know, have it pressurized to where, so when they hit it with a chainsaw, it would really split open and, you know, all the gore would fly out. So that was fun, seeing that kind of stuff, just being a part of putting that stuff together. Caroline Williams was, she was fun to have on set. I didn't have to do anything to her directly. She was more interacting with our makeup characters. I do remember there was one day where we were all sitting there pretty exhausted because these were long days in the Texas heat and all that. And she's in her little shorts and her little top, you know, and it was me, and I think it was the still photographer, just kind of sitting there, and we both had, like, I had a Polaroid and he had a camera. And she comes up and is like, you know, you guys got film in your camera? And we're like, yeah, and we're just, again, just wiped out. And then she like turned around and mooned us. But we were just both so, you know, just dead tired that none of us had the, you know, thought to like take a picture, which is why I guess why she was asking if we had film in the camera.
This is Stretch, your fearless reporter, live from Dallas.
So she was very playful. I've since, like when I worked on The Grinch, her husband, I think, was like the art director or something on it. So she played a Who in one scene. So we, you know, got to reconnect. And I think there's been some, a Chainsaw anniversary screening that I saw her at in the 2008 or something. So it's always good to see her like at Monster Palooza or some of these functions. So she was very nice and just very, you know, other than the mooning, I guess she was very professional. Bill Moseley was cool. I've worked with him since then on a couple of Rob Zombie movies. He'd done a parody film, The Texas Chainsaw Manicure, which I guess got him that part. The first 10 days that we put him in that makeup, they never shot a frame of film with him, which was just, again, I was fairly new to the film business, but it seemed like a day, maybe 2 days I could understand, but literally 10 days in a row, because we had saved the appliances, you know, as not to reuse them, but just I was like, Jesus, we didn't use you today. Oh, we're not using you tomorrow, you know. So I just decided to keep a stack of them until he actually got on camera, and there were like, again, like 10 days that, yeah, we didn't do him. And unfortunately, these were stone molds when the prosthetics were made. Now they have epoxies and stuff that last longer, but back then the molds were made out of plaster, so they would deteriorate every time you ran a prosthetic. So like our best 10 copies of it were wasted, and in fact Sean had to resculpt the piece and you know, make new molds because the molds started breaking down too much to where the edges, you know, weren't good. But again, I'd worked with Moseley since then, like on House of 1,000 Corpses and a couple of other zombie, you know, Rob Zombie movies. So it's, you know, I think we share that common bond, that, you know, Trial by Fire, whatever, you know, that was Chainsaw 2. So it's, you know, there a lot of friendships were made on that show that, you know, still to this day, you know, linger. So Sean McEnroe had what he called the brush of doom, which was he took about 6 paintbrushes and bonded them all together to make one large stipple brush, which I think now they sell brushes that kind of do that effect. But back then in 1986, you couldn't get them. So he hand built this brush that he could do this very natural looking stipple texture. And I'd never seen a makeup that elaborate, just in terms of the colors that he used, which when you're looking at them just individually, you're like, well, that's like hot pink and this weird green. It's like, well, what the hell are you? But by the time he did washes and diluted them and stippled them all over and got this, you know, very natural layering, it was just, again, very convincing. It fooled that guy at the truck stop. So yeah, McEnroe was well, they were all geniuses. They were all great artists. So I was removing, I think it was Chop Top's makeup, and I'm removing it, you know, so you got like a paintbrush with the makeup remover. And for some reason, you know, as I'm working under the piece, Hooper was watching, and I broke through the prosthetic, and it just kind of it looked like it was like, you know, something jabbing out of the guy's skull, you know. And he really flinched at that and thought it was kind of gross, which I thought was kind of weird. It's like, oh, you know, all the stuff you're doing here and this freaked you out, you know. But he did kind of flinch, and I was like, oh, you know.
Ow, he did it in my plate!
Everybody on set, I think we were jazzed that it was You know, it was in Austin, which is where they shot the original Chainsaw. So there was a sense of like, you know, hey, it's whatever 10 or 12 years later and we're back here doing it again. So I think I'm not sure how much of the crew, there were some crew, I believe, that was from the first one. I think Robert Burns, who did like all the bones and whatnot in the first one, he made like the grandma body that I think kind of collapses or something at the end. So there was some, you know, some people were back. So I think just in general, wasn't a lot going on in the Texas film community, especially back then. So just the fact that they were doing something in Texas again, and then that it was Chainsaw. So yeah, I think there was an excitement. I mean, tonally, they are certainly two different, you know, movies. The first one is almost like a documentary. You've got, you know, unknown actors, and it's all handheld, and it's just very visceral. So it's much more disturbing. I think this one, as great as Dennis Hopper was, I think that kind of made you more aware that, okay, I'm watching a movie and not, you know, not this weird. I mean, the original Chainsaw was almost the Blair Witch of, you know, 1974, you know. So this one, you know, okay, now it's a movie, it's art directed, it's big sets, it's, you know, a lot more slapstick, you know, comedy and just, you know, kind of over the top stuff. So it was definitely two different movies.
Don't you cry, my brother. I'm here now.
I will be honest, when it first came out, I mean, I read the script, I thought the script read great. When I initially saw the movie, I was, I don't know if disappointed is the right word, but it wasn't quite what I had read. So I was a little cold on it for 10 or 15 years, but again, I revisited it like in the mid-2000s. I think there was some anniversary, must have been like 2006, where I saw Caroline and Gabe Bartalos was there. And that was the first time in like 20 years that I had watched it just start to finish. And I was like, hey, you know what, this isn't too bad. Tom Savini had put together a great crew on this show, and again, with his guidance, I think we did do some excellent work that I think holds up great to this day. Again, I think the Chop Top character, the skinned Lou makeup, the old grandpa. I mean, there's a lot of really cool makeups and practical gags that I think, you know, again, hold up very convincingly. So I think it's aged very well in that regards too. So we're work to be proud of. I worked on Chainsaw 2 in the summer of '86, and then I went right into RoboCop. The movie came out, I guess Canon had pre-sold it, so it was in theaters like a month or 2 months later. I mean, like super fast. I was surprised how quickly it was released. Again, as I'd mentioned, I was a little disappointed with it upon its initial release. I remember trying to get the crew from RoboCop to go see it with me, and they thankfully had better things to do. So I went by myself, and I was kind of like, oh, shit.